When a corrupt judge attempted to humiliate Amanda Reynolds in his courtroom, he had no idea what was about to unfold. Sitting calmly with her leather portfolio clutched tightly in her hands, she appeared to be an easy target. But when he crossed the line, her surprising legal brilliance left the entire courtroom in stunned silence. Amanda Reynolds adjusted her crisp white blouse and smoothed her neatly pulled back hair as she entered the Court House. Most attorneys arrived in clusters, chatting with confidence. Amanda, however, always preferred to walk alone. Though she had earned her law degree 15 years ago, she rarely took the spotlight in major cases. Today was different. She was representing Eleanor Wilson, a 72-year-old widow fighting to save her lifelong home from being seized, a case Amanda believed was rooted in a fraudulent foreclosure. The opposition was Preston and Associates, a powerhouse law firm with strong ties to the judicial system. "You sure you want to take this on?" asked Richard Barnes, her colleague, meeting her at the courthouse steps. His worn face showed a flicker of worry. Amanda gave a firm nod. "Someone needs to stand up for Mrs. Wilson. If we don't, she loses everything." "Just be cautious in there," Richard said. "Judge Montgomery isn't known for mercy. They don't call him the Hammer for nothing." Amanda had done her research. Judge William Montgomery had presided over cases for more than 20 years and was especially harsh with those opposing major financial institutions. What wasn't widely publicized were his financial connections to various banks, including the one trying to seize Mrs. Wilson's property. "I'm ready," Amanda said calmly, hiding the nervousness she carried inside. The courtroom doors loomed ahead, grand and imposing in rich mahogany. Amanda took a deep breath and clutched her time-worn leather portfolio closer. Inside was everything: carefully compiled documentation, precedents, and evidence she had spent months collecting. "Don't let him shake you," Richard warned. "That's his favorite weapon." "I won't," Amanda assured him. As they stepped into the courtroom, Amanda could feel the stares. She recognized several attorneys from Preston and Associates, their designer suits and smug expressions intended to unnerve her. Leading them was none other than James Preston himself, a rare appearance for what should have been a routine foreclosure. "They brought the heavy hitters," Richard whispered. "Why would Preston himself show up for this?" "Because something doesn't add up here," Amanda replied in a low voice. "And they know I figured it out." Mrs. Wilson was already at the defendant's table, her aged hands slightly trembling. Amanda offered her a kind smile as she sat down beside her. "Everything's going to be okay," Amanda said, hoping she was right. The bailiff's voice rang out across the room. "All rise for the Honorable Judge William Montgomery." Judge Montgomery entered with the air of a man used to wielding total control. His silver hair was perfectly combed, his robe more distinguished than most, and his sharp eyes swept the room like spotlights. "You may be seated," he announced, his voice commanding. Amanda studied him carefully. 65, deeply connected to the city's elite, and rumored to be eyeing a political role after retiring, Judge Montgomery was no ordinary judge. He was a fixture of power. "First case, Midwest Banking Corporation versus Eleanor Wilson. Foreclosure hearing," the clerk announced. Judge Montgomery's gaze fixed on Amanda. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. He had clearly expected a senior partner to handle the Wilson case. "Counsel, please identify yourselves for the record," he instructed. James Preston stood confidently. "James Preston, Preston and Associates, representing Midwest Banking Corporation, Your Honor." Amanda stood next. "Amanda Reynolds, representing Mrs. Eleanor Wilson, Your Honor." "Ms. Reynolds," Judge Montgomery said, stretching out her name. "I don't believe I've had the pleasure of seeing you in my courtroom before." "I usually practice in the Eastern District, Your Honor," Amanda replied politely. He gave a tight smile. "Well then, I hope you find our courtroom procedures clear. Mr. Preston, you may proceed." Preston began his opening remarks with the assuredness of someone who had already secured a win. He recited missed payments, documented notifications, and typical foreclosure procedures. Amanda listened silently, occasionally jotting down notes. She might have appeared outmatched to a casual observer, but in truth she was dissecting every point, recognizing the inconsistencies she had uncovered over months of research. "Thank you, Mr. Preston," Judge Montgomery said with a notably warmer tone than he used with Amanda. "Ms. Reynolds, your opening statement." Amanda stood, portfolio in hand. Your Honor, we assert that this foreclosure is entirely fraudulent. Mrs. Wilson's payment history shows no delinquencies until after the bank system update last year. We have clear records proving every payment was made on time. Judge Montgomery's face darkened. That's a heavy accusation, counsel. We have the documentation to back it up, Your Honor. I'm sure you think you do, the judge replied, his tone thick with condescension. Proceed with your evidence, but I strongly advise you to be certain before accusing a respected financial institution of fraud. Amanda nodded unshaken. I am absolutely certain, Your Honor. Amanda methodically presented her case, clearly laying out Mrs. Wilson's consistent payment history. She showed bank statements, receipts, and electronic transfer records, which formed a clear pattern, up until 8 months ago, when the bank's system suddenly showed 3 missed payments. As you can see, Your Honor, Mrs. Wilson's automatic payments continued to be withdrawn from her account, Amanda explained, pointing to the bank statements. Yet somehow, they weren't credited toward her mortgage. Judge Montgomery looked unimpressed. Computer errors happen, counsel. That hardly rises to the level of fraud. If it were just a computer error, it would have been corrected when Mrs. Wilson first brought it to the bank's attention, Amanda continued. Instead, they added late fees, refused to acknowledge the payments she could prove she made, and fast-tracked the foreclosure, despite her 40 years of perfect payment history. James Preston stood. Your Honor, while Ms. Reynolds' storytelling is certainly colorful, the facts remain. Our records show the payments weren't received. Perhaps Mrs. Wilson's own record-keeping led to this confusion. Amanda noticed Judge Montgomery nod slightly at Preston's comment. Preston pressed on. Furthermore, given Mrs. Wilson's age and the early signs of cognitive decline noted in her medical records— Objection, Amanda interrupted. Mrs. Wilson's medical records are irrelevant to this proceeding and were neither subpoenaed nor submitted as evidence. The courtroom fell silent. How did Preston have access to Mrs. Wilson's medical information? Judge Montgomery cleared his throat. Mr. Preston, explain how you obtained the defendant's medical records. Preston hesitated. General discovery, Your Honor. No medical records were requested or produced in discovery, Amanda stated firmly. This is a serious privacy breach, and it suggests collaboration between the plaintiff and external parties to fabricate a case against my client. The judge's expression darkened. Ms. Reynolds, that's a serious accusation. Are you alleging misconduct by opposing counsel? I'm stating facts, Your Honor. Facts that form a disturbing pattern. Judge Montgomery's jaw tightened. Careful, counsel. Unfounded accusations can lead to sanctions. Amanda stayed composed. I understand, Your Honor. Good, he replied, because I'm not swayed by theatrics from inexperienced attorneys. Stick to what you can prove. Spectators in the courtroom shifted uneasily at his tone. Amanda felt Mrs. Wilson's hand tremble beside her. Your Honor, Amanda said softly, may I approach the bench with Mr. Preston? The judge motioned them forward. As Amanda gathered her files and walked to the bench, tension crackled through the courtroom. This was the turning point. Your Honor, Amanda began once they stood before the bench, we need to address a few procedural concerns before continuing. What concerns? Judge Montgomery asked, clearly annoyed. First, the unauthorized access to my client's medical records. Second, the unusually fast processing of this foreclosure. The judge cut her off. Miss Reynolds, foreclosures follow standard timelines. Not when they bypass required mediation and cooling off periods, Amanda replied steadily. This case skipped 3 mandatory steps. Preston quickly interjected. Your Honor, the clear evidence of default allowed the bank to expedite proceedings under Section 4.3 of the mortgage agreement. Judge Montgomery nodded. That seems appropriate. Section 4.3 only applies in cases of intentional default or fraud by the borrower, Amanda said. Neither applies here, so the expedited process was improper. The judge's expression hardened. Ms. Reynolds, Mr. Preston has far more experience in banking law than you. I'm inclined to accept his reading of the agreement. Amanda stayed quiet. The judge interpreted her silence as a concession. His lips curled slightly as he addressed the courtroom. Let's return to open court, he said, loud enough for all to hear. Perhaps Ms. Reynolds can offer actual evidence instead of procedural complaints. Back at their tables, Judge Montgomery continued, his tone dripping with condescension. Ms. Reynolds, we value efficiency and expertise here. Do you have anything substantive to offer, or shall we end this matter? The room was silent. All eyes turned to Amanda as she reviewed her notes. Her pause made the judge even more confident. Mrs. Wilson deserves capable representation, Judge Montgomery continued, speaking to the courtroom like a lecturer. Foreclosure cases demand deep knowledge of banking law. Perhaps someone more seasoned from your firm should have taken this on. A few of Preston's colleagues exchanged smug glances. James Preston kept his professional stance, but the satisfaction in his eyes was unmistakable. Amanda rose, her expression unchanged. Your Honor, I'd like to submit several documents into evidence. Proceed, Montgomery said with a theatrical sigh. Exhibit A, Mrs. Wilson's full payment history, verified by 2 independent auditors. Amanda handed the papers to the clerk, who passed them along to the judge. He glanced at them with mild interest. Second, Exhibit B, internal emails from Midwest Banking Corporation outlining Operation Harvest, a program that targets homes in high-value neighborhoods, especially those owned by elderly residents with substantial equity. Montgomery's eyes snapped up. What is this? Legally obtained communications from a whistleblower, Your Honor, Amanda replied calmly. And finally, Exhibit C, financial disclosures revealing real estate purchases made through shell companies partially owned by high-profile individuals. Judge Montgomery's face turned red. Counsel, what are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Amanda said, locking eyes with him. The documents speak for themselves. A heavy silence spread across the room. Judge Montgomery stared at Amanda, the arrogance in his face now replaced by something colder. Ms. Reynolds, he said through clenched teeth, approach the bench. Mr. Preston, you as well. Amanda gathered her materials. Mrs. Wilson leaned in and whispered, Is everything all right? Yes, Amanda reassured her. Just stay calm. At the bench, the judge's voice dropped low. What do you think you're doing? Presenting relevant evidence for my client, Your Honor, Amanda responded evenly. These claims are outrageous, Preston said, jumping in. This so-called Operation Harvest looks fabricated. And even if those financial records are real, they don't relate to Mrs. Wilson's missed payments. The judge nodded. I agree. Ms. Reynolds, I'm excluding these exhibits as irrelevant and potentially defamatory. Amanda had expected this. Respectfully, Your Honor, you can't exclude them. Montgomery raised his brows. Excuse me. Federal Rules of Evidence 401 and 402 clearly state that any evidence with a tendency to make a fact more or less probable is relevant unless explicitly excluded by the Constitution, statute, or other rules. I'm well aware of the federal rules, counsel, the judge snapped, but I decide what's relevant here. Yes, Your Honor, Amanda continued calmly. However, in Hutchinson versus Hensley, the Supreme Court ruled that evidence of systemic targeting of vulnerable homeowners is always relevant in foreclosure disputes. Preston frowned. I'm unfamiliar with that decision. 2018, Amanda said, majority opinion by Justice Kagan. The judge's uncertainty briefly surfaced before anger took over. Ms. Reynolds, if you're misrepresenting legal precedent, I'd never do that, Your Honor, Amanda said quickly, pulling a document from her folder. Here's the relevant excerpt. She handed it over. The judge read through it with growing discomfort. Amanda returned to the center of the courtroom. Your Honor, I now call our first witness, Michael Turner, former data analyst at Midwest Banking Corporation, and the whistleblower who provided the Operation Harvest records. A man in his 30s rose from the spectators and walked to the stand. Objection! Preston nearly shouted. We never received a witness list from opposing counsel. Amanda turned calmly toward him. Mr. Preston, I submitted my complete witness list 3 weeks ago, certified mail and acknowledgement from the clerk. Mr. Turner is listed as witness number 3. The clerk, visibly tense, confirmed it. She's correct, Your Honor. The list was filed properly. Judge Montgomery's grip on the situation was visibly slipping. He turned toward Preston. Did you receive this witness list? Preston hesitated. I'll need to check with my team. Amanda spoke up. Perhaps Mr. Preston was too busy accessing my client's private medical records to review properly submitted discovery materials. Murmurs spread through the courtroom. Judge Montgomery banged his gavel for silence, his face turning red. Your Honor, Amanda continued, before Mr. Turner testifies, I believe the court should be aware that the shell company mentioned in Exhibit C, Mountain View Properties, lists among its beneficial owners a William Montgomery. I'm curious if that's just a coincidence. The judge froze, his gavel suspended in midair. The courtroom collectively held its breath. These proceedings will be in recess for 15 minutes, he finally announced, his voice strained. Counsel for both parties in my chambers now. Judge Montgomery's chambers were lavishly decorated with leather-bound law books, awards, and photographs of him with various political figures. The contrast between his hostile expression and the smiling faces in those photos was stark. This is outrageous, he began once the door closed. Miss Reynolds, you're walking a dangerous line with these unfounded insinuations. Amanda remained calm. With all due respect, Your Honor, nothing I've presented is unfounded. The documentation is extensive and verified. Judge Preston interjected. This is a desperate attempt to distract from the simple facts of the case. Mrs. Wilson missed payments. The bank has the right to foreclose. Amanda opened her portfolio again. If I may, I'd like to clarify several points. Without waiting for permission, she placed 3 documents on the judge's desk. First, the complete audit showing Mrs. Wilson never missed a payment. Second, internal Midwest banking communications specifically identified her property as a harvest target due to its location and her age. And third, property records showing that foreclosed homes from this program were consistently purchased at auction by Mountain View Properties, often at 40% below market value. Judge Montgomery didn't touch the documents. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, Your Honor, Amanda replied calmly. I'm demonstrating a pattern. The bank falsifies payment records for targeted homeowners, expedites foreclosures, bypassing normal consumer protections, and then a shell company purchases these properties at deflated prices. The shell company's investors, including yourself, then benefit from substantial returns when the properties are redeveloped or resold. Preston's face had gone pale. Your Honor, this is absurd. Is it? Amanda interrupted, pulling out another document. This is your firm's billing record for the operational consulting project, Harvest, in over the past 3 years. Your firm has billed over $2 million for work on this specific program. The judge stood abruptly. That's enough. This case is being reassigned. I'll recuse myself due to Miss Reynolds' outrageous accusations. Recusal would be appropriate, Amanda agreed. However, reassignment won't be necessary. What do you mean? The judge demanded. As we speak, the FBI is executing search warrants at Midwest Banking Corporation, Preston and Associates, and Mountain View Properties offices. They're also seizing the banking records Your Honor attempted to seal last month in the Martinez case. Both men stared at her in shocked silence. I've been working with federal prosecutors for 11 months, Amanda explained. Mrs. Wilson's case isn't unique. It's one of 78 we've identified. I was specifically asked to handle this case because they needed someone the banking establishment wouldn't consider a threat. The color drained from Judge Montgomery's face. You were building a case all along? Yes, Your Honor. Your financial entanglements with Midwest Banking and Mountain View made you a person of interest early in the investigation. Your treatment of me today was predictable. A knock at the door interrupted them. 2 men in suits entered, showing FBI credentials. Judge William Montgomery, one said formally, we need you to come with us to answer some questions. Preston stood shakily. I need to call my attorney. That would be advisable, Amanda noted, though you might want to find representation outside your firm. As the FBI agents escorted the judge out, he turned to Amanda. You played us. Amanda shook her head. No, Your Honor. You played yourself. I just followed the evidence. When Amanda returned to the courtroom alone, confused murmurs filled the air. The bailiff looked uncertain. Without the judge present, Mrs. Wilson clutched her purse anxiously. What's happening? She whispered as Amanda sat beside her. Justice, Mrs. Wilson, Amanda replied softly. Finally, justice. The courtroom doors opened again as 2 FBI agents escorted Judge Montgomery out, followed by additional agents leading a visibly shaken James Preston. The spectators erupted into shocked conversations. The court clerk, looking bewildered, approached Amanda. Ms. Reynolds, what should we do about today's proceedings? I believe Judge Harmison from the Fourth Circuit is available to take over, Amanda suggested. I've already spoken with the administrative office about the situation. As if on cue, Judge Eliza Harmison entered through a side door. In her 60s, with a reputation for fierce independence and ethical standards, she surveyed the chaotic scene with practiced calm. Court will come to order, she announced, her authoritative voice immediately quieting the room. I've been briefed on the extraordinary circumstances here. This court will recess until tomorrow at 9 a.m., at which point we will restart these proceedings properly. As people began to exit, reporters who had somehow caught wind of the situation crowded the hallway outside. Amanda guided Mrs. Wilson through a side exit to avoid the commotion. I don't understand everything that happened, Mrs. Wilson said once they were in a quiet consultation room. But I know you saved my home. Amanda smiled. It was never just about your home, Mrs. Wilson. This scheme has hurt dozens of families. The evidence we gathered will help all of them. Richard Barnes burst into the room, his eyes wide. Amanda, it's all over the courthouse. Montgomery and Preston were taken out by the FBI. What did you do? My job, she replied simply. But how? I mean, he stammered. I've been working with federal prosecutors since last year, Amanda explained. After I noticed the pattern in foreclosure cases, I took my concerns to them. They were already investigating the bank for other irregularities. Richard shook his head in amazement. All those times I worried you weren't experienced enough for these cases. That perception was useful, Amanda noted. Being underestimated gave me access no one else could have had. Mrs. Wilson took Amanda's hand. You're not what you seem, are you? Amanda squeezed the elderly woman's hand gently. None of us are, Mrs. Wilson. That's the lesson here. 1 month later, Amanda sat in her modest office, reviewing case files. The aftermath of what the press had dubbed the Harvest Scandal continued to unfold across front pages nationwide. Judge Montgomery had resigned from the bench and was now facing federal charges for corruption, fraud, and racketeering. James Preston and 3 other partners at his firm had been indicted. Midwest Banking Corporation's stock had plummeted, and class action lawsuits were mounting. A knock at her door pulled Amanda from her thoughts. Richard entered, carrying a newspaper. Still making headlines, he remarked, tossing the paper on her desk. The front page story detailed how federal investigators had expanded their probe to 5 other states where similar foreclosure schemes had been uncovered. The justice system works slowly, but it does work, Amanda replied. Richard took a seat across from her. The partners want to talk about making you head of the new consumer protection division they're creating. Your name has become quite the asset. Amanda smiled slightly. I'm not interested in being anyone's asset. Then what are you interested in? Before she could answer, her phone rang. She checked the caller ID, U.S. Attorney's Office. I need to take this, she said. Richard nodded and left as Amanda answered. After a brief conversation, she hung up and gazed out her window at the city skyline. The U.S. Attorney had just offered her a position in their office, leading a new task force on financial crimes against vulnerable populations. It was meaningful work that would allow her to help more people like Mrs. Wilson. Her computer chimed with an email notification. It was from Mrs. Wilson, with photos attached of her grandchildren visiting her at the home she had almost lost. The subject line read simply, "Thank you for fighting when no one else would." That evening, as Amanda cleared out her office after accepting the U.S. Attorney's offer, she reflected on the events that had brought her here. Judge Montgomery had seen a quiet woman he thought he could intimidate. He never suspected she had quietly built a case that would bring down an entire corrupt network. As she placed her law degree in a box, Amanda recalled the judge's words in his chambers. You played us. She hadn't corrected him then, but the truth was simpler. She had merely been patient, thorough, and unbending in her pursuit of justice. The corruption had exposed itself once someone was willing to look closely enough. Amanda turned off the lights in her office for the final time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was ready for them. Quietly, methodically, brilliantly. Life teaches us that appearances can be deceiving, and judgment often clouds the truth. Has someone underestimated you, only to be surprised by your capabilities? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear about a time when you proved someone wrong through your actions rather than words. If you enjoyed this tale of justice and unexpected brilliance, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories that remind us all why we should never judge a book by its cover. Where are you watching from today? Let us know.